Welcome back, everybody. Tonight it's a little chilly out here. I mean, it's 64 degrees, so it's not really that bad. I know you guys are like, oh, 64 degrees, that's not chilly at all, that's not cold at all. Yeah, it's cold for Louisiana, okay? It's not really cold, but I mean, it's enough to work in the garage. So that's what we're gonna do, because I finally cleared out enough room, and we're going to unbox the Quickjack and put it together and play with it a little bit. And then we can get the Camaro in here, do an oil change, do a lot of other little stuff. Taillights, the latch, steering wheel, the tilt thing, same as the other Camaro. So I can finish the series that I started on the original Camaro. So we have a video on taking the steering wheel off already. It's gonna be exact same on this one because that was a 91, this is a 90. So it's gonna be the same. So I don't need to do that one again. I might, I don't know. The last one was kind of, didn't go all the way down to the actual fix of the problem. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I may repost it, or not repost it. I may redo the video. We'll see. But yeah, then we can put the BMW up and fix the transmission, sell that, and then a couple other little things on the Camaro just to, you know, give it a once over because I haven't had it in the air yet, and then pull the Chevelle in, start working on that. So I'm gonna switch cameras because I have the GoPro up here that I can't point at like this, that you can get the top-down view, and then I'm standing in the front of another camera that you can get a better view of what's going on, so I don't have to hold the phone and do all this one-handed. So I'm gonna switch to those cameras in a minute, because do it now, you'll just be staring at my jeans. Anyway, let's get started. Hopefully the audio will be okay. I didn't set up a mic, I'm just kind of winging it on this one. I know it's gonna be okay for this video because this always has audio just fine. Hopefully the GoPro will pick up all the audio. Let's get going, because I'm excited to get this thing open. I've been waiting for a long time to get this thing up and running so I can start my other projects. So yeah, switching cameras now. So I'm not gonna be in frame a whole lot because I have to be like over everything to be in frame. So I'm just gonna be pointing at stuff, and you can see what I have kind of my area marked out here. Again, we're just kind of wing it. This is my first large unboxing, but yeah, let's go for it. So we got 3 boxes. I'm gonna get the straps off of them. All right, we got the straps off. So let's see our major assemblies here. We got wood. Where am I gonna put all this stuff? One at a time. Hey, look at that. Box 1 has instructions. Imagine that. Let's read. Need my high-priced chair here. This thing is a novel. It's huge. This is 59 really thick pages. So, Quickjack components include 2 jack frames, 8 rubber lift blocks, 1 power unit. There it is, but it's just not pictured. Not shown. There you go, right there. All right, we're caught up. A parts bag. That's fun. 2 power unit quick disconnect fittings, 2 male quick disconnect, 4 female quick disconnect, 2 short hydraulic hoses, 2 long hydraulic hoses. Select the setup site. Check. Unpack the components that came with the Quickjack. Well, part check. Make sure there's adequate clearance on all sides and above. Check. Locate and examine the air and hydraulic cylinders. Check. Install the hydraulic elbow fitting. Okay, now we're getting into doing stuff. We're not there yet. Okay, we need a metric hex key set, a metric socket set and ratchet set, metric wrench set or an adjustable wrench, and a screwdriver set. And keep a rag handy during setup. Hydraulic fluid sometimes leaks. At some point during setup, you will need to provide some air pressure up to 50 psi for the air cylinder and 2.1 quarts, 2 liters of hydraulic fluid. Open the boxes and arrange the Quickjack components where you will be setting them up. All right, let's finish doing that. I think it's time for some fast forward. pretty thumbnail picture. So let's go over what we got. We have our power unit here. We have our 2 frames here. We have our 2 short hoses here. We have our fittings here. We have our tall blocks here. And the blocks are, ironically, like Legos, so they can piece together. They don't stay, obviously, but they have nubs and they look like Legos. We have our 2 long hydraulic hoses, 4 short blocks, and 2 handles, positioning handles. So let's get back into the instructions and see how to put all this together. All right, step 1, 6mm Allen. Take these plugs off. All right, next we install the elbow fitting. Normally, I'd use a line wrench because they're better for fittings. They don't strip them out, but this one won't go over this piece here, and I don't wanna, it won't go. So, it's 11/16. We're gonna use a regular wrench. Now you wanna make sure when you're on fittings that if you do have to use a regular wrench, you wanna make sure it's exactly the right size so you don't round them off. So, also the instructions say do not use any thread seal on here. No tape, no goop, no nothing. This has an O-ring here, and that will be sufficient for hydraulic fluid. So, we're gonna put this in here. So when you're tightening down hydraulic fittings, you want to loosen this off. That way this can compress. And when it compresses in there, then you want to clock this the way you want it. Then tighten this down to wherever you need it to be. And that'll snug that on to wherever this needs to be clocked. So when you have a clocked one and you put this on here, you always want to back it up with another wrench. Not on the throat here, you want to put it on the flat, the full flat side here. So you get as much bite as possible. This will keep it in alignment wherever you need it while you tighten this down and torque it down. So now that we got one on, we're gonna put this one on that side. Also, normally you want to lubricate the threads with whatever fluid is being used. But as you can see, there's already enough fluid in there on the threads that we don't need to do that. All right, we have the 2 elbow fittings on our hydraulic actuators. Now we have to prepare these short hoses with the quick disconnects so that they will fit on the hydraulic actuators and go to the long hoses, which will go to the pump. So let's prepare these short hoses. It says that this thread locker should cure for 24 hours. So we're gonna do these. We're gonna get everything situated and connected and hooked up, and then we're gonna come back tomorrow and finish up, fill it up with fluid, run the pressure, and finish up the video then. So there's a male and a female end. Female end has a plug in it. The male end has a cap. The male end is going to go to the fitting, and then the female end is going to go onto our hydraulic actuator. So when you're putting on thread locker, you don't want to use a lot, and you don't want to put it on the first couple threads because that can mess up the sealing surface. It can get inside the hose, it can mess up, cause clogs and all sorts of nasty stuff. So put it just on a couple threads because it will spread out just a little bit. Now if you want, you can put some gloves on, spread it around. I don't think it's going to be necessary for this one because we got a little bead there, and as you can see when we put this on, it will spread around. Now let's go find the right size wrenches for these. You want to hold both of them and make sure that you tighten this down all the way. This is a good time to use the line wrenches because they should actually fit over both of these. So in true non-expensive fashion, the lower one, the hose one, the 17mm, the fitting is a 7/8. All right, those are nice and tight. Let's do the other hose. One of these days, I'm gonna clean off my workbench and put a camera on top of it so I don't have to stand in the middle of my garage and stand up and do these things. These should go on several turns without having to use tools. If they don't, then you have cross thread, you need to take it off. Screw it on by hand as far as you can go. Several turns, like I said. If not, back it off by hand and make sure you get it right before you start cranking it down with tools. All right, that's good to go. Hopefully this is the same. Yep. So we use the 17mm to hook the hoses, the small hoses, onto the hydraulic actuator. Now it does say nowhere on the elbows should you use thread lock. In the instructions, they say don't use it on any of the elbows. You can use it on this end, you can use it on all the other fittings, but don't use it on the elbows on either side of the elbow. One more thing, it says that these hoses need to go underneath the lifts because the lifts are gonna come up this way. So you wanna make sure not to get the hoses in a place where they're gonna get cut by the lift operating. Now again, these should go on several threads without using a tool. So make sure you get them finger tight, several threads, not just one thread. Then you can use your tool to tighten them down. Same thing with the other one. Make sure that the hose is out of the way of the operation of the lift. All right, now that we have these hand tightened down, we can use our wrench, 17mm again, tighten the hoses to the elbows. So, fun fact, if you use a line wrench, tighten it down, the B-nut will mismatch with the hex on the hose, and you won't be able to get the wrench off. So we gotta use a regular wrench on this one too. I don't like using regular wrenches on fittings, but we're gonna have to. 17mm. All right, we got our two short hoses connected to the hydraulic actuators. Now let's see what we gotta do next. All right, with our short hoses connected, it's time to connect our long hoses to the other female fittings. These are both the same on either side, so it doesn't matter which side you do it, just make sure that you use the big female quick disconnect fittings. These will also get thread locker, so we'll also have to wait 24 hours for this to cure before we can put pressure on it. This stuff's just rebottled Gorilla Glue. Same as the other fittings, 7/8 for the large one, 17mm for the smaller one. Back to the line wrench, because I like them better. There's one side done. So, one note about hydraulic fittings, especially quick disconnect. There's a little notch here, a little ball, and it's not gonna twist if it's not engaged. When it is engaged, it's gonna go forward. I hope there's no fluid in here. This is moved forward now, off the ball, and this can spin, and you should spin it so that it can't come apart. It won't come apart under pressure. To take the disconnect off, spin it around to where the ball is, then you can disconnect it. And then always remember to put your caps on, because you don't want to get dirt and nasty stuff injected into your hose. So, it says to connect one end to the small hose and the other end to the pump, but we haven't put those fittings on the pump yet, unless I missed a step, but we're gonna connect this end to the small hose. All right, then we do it one more time for one more hose. Now the other reason you don't want to put too much on and go all the way down the threads is because these do not engage fully. As you saw with the other one, this is only going to go about maybe 2 more threads down. It's not going to go all the way down to this hex. So you don't want to have thread locker on every single thread. You want just enough to seal the threads that are in contact with the fitting. So one last thing about quick disconnect fittings. These are sealed, mostly. They're gonna have hydraulic fluid running through the whole system, but when they're disconnected, you might get a little drip of hydraulic fluid and the male fitting itself might be a little wet, and it might be a little wet here. Make sure you wipe it off before you put the cap on. Try to keep things clean, or else any of the fluid that is left around will gather dust, will gather dirt. It's a magnet for it. But the fluid stays inside the hose, so you don't have to bleed it every single time you use it. It stays completely a sealed system. That's why using quick disconnects are good. So the second one done, let's hook it up to the other short hose and then see what we gotta do next. All right, next thing is fill the air cylinders with air between 40 and 50 PSI. It says do not go above 50 PSI. It'll probably cause some damage. I wouldn't do it. Before you fill with air, push the Schrader valve in a little bit, make sure that it operates. You'll get a little bit of air out, you might get a little bit of oil out, and that's fine because you want to release the oil so that you're using just air, not any kind of oil in there. There's gonna be some oil to lubricate the cylinder, but you don't need a lot. You wanna make sure that you're compressing air. Luckily, there's a little nub on the cap that you can use to push the Schrader valve in a little bit. So we got a little air coming out, no oil came out, so we're good to go. The instructions say to pressurize this with the frames completely bottomed out. They are, I haven't lifted them at all. They're completely bottomed out. Now we're gonna pressurize it between 40 and 50 PSI. It says do not go above 50 PSI. So this one sounded like it had a little bit of air leaking past the cylinder, but if you hit it with a blast of air quick, it seats that cylinder and then you can fill it up to the pressure. All right, one last thing for tonight. We're gonna put the male quick disconnect fittings on the power supply, and it says do not use thread locking on these because they have an O-ring. Rule of thumb, if it has an O-ring, don't use thread locker. Now there's not a lot of room to get a tool in the middle one, so I'm gonna tighten that one down first and then we'll put this one in. And as standard with all of the quick disconnect fittings, they're all 7/8. Now fittings with an O-ring don't have to be super tight because that O-ring is gonna get compressed and you don't wanna compress it too much to where the two metal pieces can snap it or bind it. And I think we're done for the night because we gotta wait on this thread sealer to cure it for 24 hours. So, I'm gonna finish up tomorrow, but with the magic of editing, it's gonna look like it's right now. So it's been 24 hours, I've eaten, slept, I've eaten again, I've showered, done homework, and now we're here. So this is the fun part today. We're actually gonna put fluid in here, we're gonna bleed them, and then we're gonna make them operational. So the instructions say to lift up the back end, not from the back here, but from the actual frame that touches the ground. That will tilt the cylinders so all the air will come to the top so we can bleed them out completely. So let's get started on that. All right, so the instructions say to use 2 of the larger blocks and 1 of the shorter blocks together. So we're gonna lift the frame up about this high. And remember, we're gonna lift it up from the frame part that touches the ground and not from back here, because back here is what will move, so it won't actually bleed it. There's one, let's do this one. So now that we have both of these in the air, we're gonna get the hoses connected to the hydraulic pump. We're gonna do one at a time just to get a better bleed. Now remember, after you've connected it, spin the collet so that the little notch is not where the ball bearing is, so that your hydraulic line is locked in. Okay, time to add some fluid. It says to add automatic transmission fluid. We're gonna be using the Amsoil Signature Series ATF because it's the best. I want this to last for a long time, so why not? We'll put a link in the description if you want to get some for your car, or if you get one of these Quickjacks, you can get it for your Quickjack as well. The instructions say it takes 2.1 quarts or 2 liters. sure you have a funnel, because no matter how steady your hand is, you're probably not gonna pour it in that small of a hole. We're gonna add it into the reservoir here, and I might need to get a different funnel. Make sure you get a funnel that actually fits down in the hole, not just rests on top. It'll save yourself some mess to clean up. Now you don't want to add all 2 quarts at the same time because it's going to get pumped through the hoses because they're empty. So you want to fill it up with 1 quart, put a little bit more in, fill up the reservoir, and then run it through the lines, through the system, and then we'll add some more and top it off at the end. Make sure, no matter how excited you get, how eager you get, do not run the pump without fluid in the reservoir. You can severely damage the pump. So that's about 1.5 quarts. We're gonna put the cap back on the reservoir for now and make sure that the bleeder valve is open so that all the air can escape as it works through the system. The reservoir is plastic, so you don't need to reef down the cap. Just make it hand tight. Okay, so now the instructions say to raise the frame up about 8 inches, but not to the first locking position. Raise it up and drop it down 3 times. That'll work the fluid through the system, that'll push the air back out of the system into the reservoir. And then after that, we can go to the bleeder screw and get any extra trapped air bled out. Now it's gonna take a minute to work all the air out of the cylinder, out of the hoses, and work the fluid into the system. All right, now we got it working. We're gonna drop it back down again. That's about 8 inches. Give it a little assistance to go back down because we still have some air in the system. Now I'm gonna do it more than 3 times because I felt a lot of squishy air in there. That feels a lot better. Now we're gonna go to the bleed screw. Air and hydraulic fluid are gonna come out, so we're gonna put a rag underneath. It's gonna be a mess regardless, so I'm gonna probably put some gloves on just so we don't get too messy. And we're gonna top off the fluid in the reservoir since we have fluid in the hose now, and the reservoir level has gone a little bit lower. Now we're gonna bleed that last little bit of air out of this cylinder by using a 3/16 Allen wrench. This bleeder screw was really tight from the factory, and I had to tap it with a hammer to actually get it to move, so I didn't strip out the bleeder screw. It's okay if you have to do that, just be careful, but now I have it loose enough to actually hit it with the tool without the hammer. So when we loosen this up, we're gonna get some air. We should get some air, and we definitely will get some fluid, because this is just opening the hydraulic port to the atmosphere. There we go, starting to get some air out. There's some fluid seepage. Now it's gonna look milky because there's a whole bunch of tiny little air bubbles. When you're done bleeding the air out, make sure that you tighten that bleeder screw back down because there's a lot of pressure in these hydraulic cylinders. All right, let's give it one more run up and then run down, and then we'll switch over to the other one and we'll bleed out the hose and this cylinder here, and I believe we'll be done. All right, let's put the other hose on, and then we'll run this one and bleed the air out of it. Now I'm not only switching hoses, I'm switching ports, so we're gonna run it off of the other port so it bleeds that little, inch of a line, and it doesn't introduce any air into the system the next time we go to use it. All right, with our other hose connected, it's time to raise this one up 3 times, just like we did that one. Bleed out all the air from the line and from the cylinder. Okay, with that run through and the hose filled, we should be able to top off our reservoir now. Now it's not going to take much more, we're just going to add a little bit so there's not so much of an air gap at the top of the reservoir. bleed this last cylinder. We're gonna connect the other hose. We're gonna run them up both at the same time and make sure that they're even. Since that one had more air come out after a couple spurts of fluid, I'm gonna bleed this one again just to make sure. This one had so much air in it, but I went ahead and I'm bleeding that one again too. I'm just gonna let them bleed for a couple minutes. They keep getting a little spurts of air here and there. So I'm just gonna let them bleed the air out for a little bit, and then I'm gonna tighten them up, and then we have one last check to do. There's still air coming out, but it sounds like the air is losing pressure. Just tap the up button like I just did, and that'll build the hydraulic pressure back up, and it'll continue to bleed the air out. But be careful, just tap the button, don't hold it down. Now remember, hydraulics are extremely powerful and they can be very dangerous, especially when they're under high pressure. So make sure you understand what you're working with before you do things. Every now and then, a good way to check if there's any more air in the system is to wipe the fluid away and see the fluid that's coming out. If it's milky, like it has a lot of tiny air bubbles in it, you still have some air to bleed out. If it's a good solid red color or golden color for using hydraulic fluid, then you're probably done and you can tighten them down. These both still have some air bubbles in the fluid, so we're gonna keep bleeding the air out. Okay, now that both hydraulic cylinders are bled, all the hoses are bled, and the pump is bled, we're gonna put these on the ground and we're gonna make sure that these fittings don't hit anything when we raise them all the way up. That's our last thing to do. Apparently I took my gloves off too soon, and I didn't use enough rag, but I'll clean that up in just a little bit. So we're gonna run these up all the way, make sure that there's no clearance issue with those elbows, and then we'll be done. Okay. Clearances are good. Both frames are all the way up. They made it to the second lock and we're good to go. One more thing to remember, when you're lifting a vehicle, make sure after the safety bar goes past that second lock to drop it down onto that second lock so that the weight of the vehicle is not on the hydraulic cylinders, it's actually on the frame and that lock bar. Well, there you have the unboxing and setup of the Quickjack 5000 TL. If you found this useful or helpful, give it a like. Definitely subscribe, because now that these are out, we're gonna be working on the cars a lot more. But for now, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.